Chapter 1. The Twilight Walk Through the Countryside. As the sun dipped below the rolling hills of County Kerry, southwest Ireland, casting long shadows and painting the sky in shades of deep orange and violet, a sense of mystery settled over the land. It was twilight, a time when the boundary between the mundane and the supernatural blurred, and a young man called Sean found himself at the heart of an enigmatic tale. Sean, a tall and broad Irishman in his late 20s, possessed an appearance that spoke of Viking ancestry from times long past. His light blue eyes were reminiscent of midsummer skies. His thick blonde hair, the shade of ripened wheat, framed a broad and pleasant face, somewhat weathered by the elements. He was lean and rangy, his skin pulled tight over his face and showing his cable-like muscles cording his neck. As he walked along the quaint cobblestone streets of his beloved hometown, Listowel, Sean's mind drifted into a state of relaxed contentment. The echoes of history resonated through the ancient stone architecture, and the soft glow of street lamps cast warm, inviting pools of light along his path. The distant hum of conversation from cozy pubs filled the air with a reassuring sense of camaraderie, and Sean's breath grew deep and melodic. As he meandered along a winding path that led him beyond the last few stone houses and farm buildings, Sean couldn't help but feel drawn to the legends and myths that had been passed down through generations in his homeland. These stories of ancient heroes and mystical creatures seemed to whisper in the winds and resonated with his adventurous mind. Gradually, his path led him further towards a remote and secluded corner of the countryside, where the rolling hills of Tanavala rose up to meet the fading light of the evening sky. His senses grew keenly attuned to the world around him, the sweet fragrance of blooming wild roses, the distant call of a lark bidding farewell to the day, and the gentle caress of the evening breeze against his freckled complexion. He continued to climb the ascending road, carrying himself with confidence, and the kind of subtle grace that comes from physical conditioning and hard training. He soon passed a couple of isolated stone cottages, their thatched roofs covered in a patchwork of moss and wildflowers. Smoke gently billowed from their chimneys, the only sign of life in this tranquil and remote corner of the world. The air held a promise of adventure, of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Each step he took carried him further away from human settlement until he found himself at the threshold of an old, forgotten woodland. The verdant canopy above was composed of ancient oak and ash trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like ancient sentinels guarding the secrets of the forest. The air was heavy with the earthy scent of damp soil and the sweet fragrance of wildflowers that thrived in the shade, and the last few rays of sunlight filtered through the dense foliage, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. It beckoned to Sean with an unspoken invitation, its atmosphere thick with enchantment and the promise of hidden wonders. The young man couldn't resist the call, and with each step deeper into the woods, he felt as though he was stepping into a realm untouched by time. Chapter 2. The Stone Circle. Sean ventured into the forest with measured steps, his boots crunching softly on the carpet of fallen leaves. The evening held a temperate embrace. The scent of damp earth and moss pervaded the atmosphere, an earthy fragrance that spoke of centuries of life and decay. As he delved deeper into the woodland, a rising chill in the air began to make itself known. Sean looked around at the trees closing in around him, not recognizing where he was. But despite this unnerving fact, decided to continue walking deeper into the heart of the woods. After 10 minutes of walking, he reached the crescent of a small hill and glanced down through the canopy below him, towards the agricultural valley that stretched out into the distance. Darkness blanketed the landscape, but there was light here and there in scattered bands and broken commas of color. Light from the fires of farm buildings and villages, yellow-orange and hellish in shade. He turned back, feeling as though he was leaving that mundane world behind, and without really realizing why, continued walking deeper into this lost realm, untouched by time. And then he saw it. Amidst two gnarled elm trees, he discerned something that wasn't natural at all. He was peering through the gloom at a stone circle. It stood there, nestled in a clearing as if placed by the hands of ancient druids, a long-forgotten throwback to the ancient Indo-Aryan culture who had inhabited the land millennia ago. It was weird, he thought. He had heard tales of stone circles up in the hills, but no one had actually confirmed their existence. And yet, he could see that these stones were real, their surfaces weathered by centuries of wind and rain. They were adorned in a rich tapestry of ivy and moss, as if nature herself had sought to embrace and protect these ancient sentinels. Arranged in a perfect circle, these megaliths exuded an aura of quiet power, their silent presence speaking volumes about the mysteries they held. In the center of the circle, one stone stood taller and more imposing than the rest. Its surface was etched with a mesmerizing array of symbols and markings, each telling a story of a time long past. Sean was puzzled. He had come this way before and never seen anything like them. But then he had never come up here at this time of year, on the eve of summer solstice. He approached it with a mixture of awe and reverence, his fingertips tracing the ancient carvings as he sought to unravel their meaning. Sean dwelled on his disquiet alone. The vibrant symphony of nature, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the distant call of woodland creatures faded into an unsettling silence. A sudden impulse to run shifted in his subconscious, but the young man quashed it. In this surreal and hushed atmosphere, a profound sense of timelessness began to settle upon Sean. It was as though the boundaries between the past, present, and future had blurred, and he felt as if he stood at the nexus of a moment that had been formed. Chapter 3. The Ethereal Beings. Then in a moment of breathtaking wonder, a soft, haunting melody filled the twilight air. The music, eerie and dissonant, bore no resemblance to anything Sean had ever heard before. Its discordant notes resonated not with beauty, but with an unsettling disquiet that clawed at the edges of his consciousness. It was as if the very fabric of reality itself had begun to fray. As the haunting melody wrapped its tendrils around him, Sean's palms grew clammy, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. His heart quickened, and he felt a growing unease settle deep within him. He thought he saw something, but must have been imagining. Shadows, previously indistinct and fleeting, began to take on form and substance. Sean's heart quickened, and a growing unease gnawed at the edges of his awareness. He couldn't quite put it into words, but he knew on some primal level that he was slipping into another state of consciousness. Ethereal beings, their eyes aglow with an unsettling luminescence, emerged from the depths of the forest with an eerie grace. Their movements were otherworldly, their dance a macabre and twisted parody of beauty. They appeared less like benevolent spirits, and more like entities from the darkest corners of the supernatural realm, their true intentions shrouded in ambiguity. As Sean watched on in a mix of terror and fascination, the figures' forms seemed to shift and warp, making it impossible to discern their true nature. Their faces remained obscured, hidden behind veils of darkness and uncertainty, leaving only their haunting eyes visible. Each gaze was a silent interrogation, probing the depths of Sean's being with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. It was as though they could plumb the very recesses of his thoughts and emotions. unraveling the fabric of his consciousness with an unsettling ease. Sean was torn between the terror that threatened to consume him and the morbid fascination that held him in thrall. The uncertainty of their intent hung in the air like a thick fog, a suffocating weight that pressed upon him from all sides. He felt as though he stood at the crossroads of existence itself, a place where the boundaries between the tangible and the intangible, the known and the unknown, had dissolved into a maddening ambiguity. Chapter 4. The Prophecy. Gradually, one of these figures, a palpable presence exuding an aura of mystery, began to approach Sean with slow, deliberate steps. The air around this enigmatic being crackled with an eerie, otherworldly energy, sending unsettling vibrations through Sean's body. This figure, her voice carrying a chilling undertone, whispered in a manner that sent a shiver down Sean's spine. Her words were cloaked in cryptic ambiguity, as if she took delight in the torment of half-truths and riddles. She alluded to a long-forgotten prophecy, hidden beneath the sands of time, hinting that Sean's role in it was far more complex and perilous than he could have ever imagined. With ominous gravity, the enigmatic figure explained that a looming darkness threatened to devour the land, casting a sinister pall over its very existence. This metaphysical malevolence hovered at the fringes of reality, poised to breach the fragile boundaries separating worlds. Its sinister tendrils sought to infiltrate the very soul of Ireland, draining the life force of its people and casting an inescapable shadow over their psyche. Once tight-knit communities would unravel, their collective spirit drained by the relentless grip of this cosmic horror. The quintessential essence of Irish spirit, vibrant and enduring, would wither and fade, devoured by the insatiable appetite of these other-worldly entities. More troubling still, these metaphysical tendrils were already in motion, beginning to sink into the minds and thoughts of the land's inhabitants, twisting desires, undermining hope, and sowing seeds of discord and mistrust in their wake. The ethereal beings revealed that the stone circle, now a conduit of immense cosmic power, served as a portal to the other world, a realm of unfathomable magic and mystery that mirrored the madness Sean had read about in H.P. Lovecraft's Eldritch Dimensions. Their eyes filled with a profound knowing. They imparted the gravity of Sean's mission, to serve as the mortal conduit by which they could confront and counter this malevolent force, a task that would demand not only courage, but an unyielding will to preserve the very fabric of existence itself. But their words were not a mere command. They were a fervent plea, an appeal to Sean's sense of duty and responsibility. The weight of them settled upon his shoulders as Sean felt the sweat run down his back. This was no simple decision, he knew, no ordinary hero's journey. It was a descent into the abyss of cosmic horror, a quest that would test the limits of his mettle, challenge the boundaries of his existence, and re-mold the contours of his very consciousness. He hesitated, his gaze darting between the ethereal beings, grappling with the magnitude of the moment. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, and the forest's shadows twisted and writhed in an eerie, chaotic dance, mirroring the bizarre movements of the ethereal beings. Doubt tugged at the edges of his determination, making him question if he had the strength for what was being asked of him. But deep within, the desire to cast aside the suffocating veil of unhappiness that threatened to smother the land surged through his veins, a fierce current that beat through his heart. With a steadying breath, he nodded, accepting the weight of the responsibility placed upon him. The beings didn't waste a moment. They bestowed upon him a psychological cloak, woven from the silvery light of the moon, and a metaphysical sword, forged from the brilliance of distant stars. These symbolic tools would aid him in his journey. With a final blessing, the beings dissolved into the shadows, leaving Sean alone in the ancient stone circle. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself, and with one decisive step, crossed the threshold of the portal and entered the half-spun realm of the otherworld.